Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of us analyzing the lore of Bloodborne, looking more specifically at the Japanese text of the game and trying to piece together if there's any discrepancies between descriptions, notes, things like that to gain a more informed reading of the lore of the game and whether or not the English holds up to the Japanese. We've already noted like a lot of discrepancies already. Yesterday's episode, we did not go to Ram after going to Bergenworth. Instead, we focused on going to the side areas to gain a bit more insight before we activated the Red Moon phase of the game. Now that that's been done, we've already got a 45 insight up here. The Brain Suckers took a couple points, but that's not going to really matter at this point. We visited the Nightmare Frontier and examined the kind of nightmarish creatures that inhabit that area, the amygdala, winter lanterns, crawlers, the wandering madnesses, etc. And then after the Nightmare Frontier, we went to the Forsaken Castle Cainhurst, examined many of the statues there. I did end up finding out more about them, and I will talk about that a little bit more later when we send Alfred to Annalise, and that'll be a good opportunity to re-examine some of those statues and things like that. And today we're going to be going through, first looking at like what the different levels of insight will bring about. And sorry, I'm a little bit distracted right now. Alright, so with the 45 insight, we can already see the amygdala in the Cathedral Ward, the one in front of the Yahar'gul Chapel, as well as the one right outside the Cathedral Ward. When we get to 50 insight, the music in the Hunter's Dream will change. So we'll listen to it for a little bit. So we've got a kind of soothing melody. Once we gain 50 points of insight, that solo female singer and like the violin will change. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head how it changes, but the music will change at 50 points of insight. We're just going to go all the way up to 60 right now to unlock the sound of the baby Merca. Listen to this later. We will end up hearing like the sounds of a baby crying in the background, and that's going to tie into what I believe is part of the Mensis ritual that Ram is concealing, and the note in Bergenworth which talks about the rituals being concealed is supposed to be tied to the voice of Murgo. So going back to the Cathedral Ward, we'll look at the amygdala first and see the little messengers that are around the lever by the gate, which we use the Chief Hunter emblem to open up. Hope everyone's having a good day. It's raining out here, so it's pretty tranquil. Coming into the Cathedral Ward, the NPCs won't say anything different despite having killed the extra bosses.
Oh, hello. Sort of only so.
There ain't no more survivors. There can't.
The old lady might say something different. She might start offering us sedatives.
Oh,
Right.
there you are. You're early, dear. Is anything the matter? You can always tell me. Mother will make everything better. What's wrong? Anything you'd like to tell me?
So you can say like you have your own share of woes. The Japanese for her line is a little bit different. Like she asked if we are like feeling any pain, and that idea of pain can be taken both like literally and metaphorically. That's a little bit hard to convey in English, so I'm perfectly fine with what they ended up going with. It sounds very natural. I don't know if it's natural in the context, but it's okay.
You poor thing. But don't you worry. This will help you forget. Forget your troubles. Forget your cares.
So she does give us some sedatives. I find it interesting that she says it'll help us forget. It almost seems as though she may have been using the sedatives, even though they do seem to be different from like the old blood or the beast blood that the people of Yarnum have been using. We can use sedatives, of course, to suppress the effects of the arcane and the beasthood transformation, which leads me to believe it is just plain human blood.
Oh, what do you remember?
And so you can keep milking her for some sedatives, and then she'll eventually leave the area, perhaps in search of them, and end up getting killed.
Oh my, but don't you worry. This will help you forget your trouble.
So she increases the amount of sedatives up to like to 3 of them. I don't remember exactly if she will talk about how you're just like your father if you continue down that quest chain and like get her killed, or if it's something that only happens after the blood moon gets revealed. I apologize for not quite looking that up thoroughly to like confirm it one way or another. And there's the amygdala like kind of hanging on the outside of the chapel. And Zuhu says it's pretty humid there, no rain though, so no rain though, sadly. Yeah. I do like the rain, it's very calming. I like the smells that it produces and things like that. So this amygdala has been here the entire game. When we first came to the Cathedral Ward and picked up like the top hat and things over here, we saw that crazy vacuum going off, and that is tied to the hand of the amygdala trying to reach out and grab us. If we get grabbed right now, it will transport us into the Hunter's Nightmare, the DLC for this game, because we have the Eye of the Blood Drunk Hunter. And we're not going to try to access that right now. So coming back to the gate with the Hunter Chief emblem, before there were no messengers over there, and now they're clearly crowded around that lever. And if we hold up the emblem to the gate, we can see them pull it. It's a little bit hard to get a view of it. And it says the special emblem opened the gate. And if we didn't have this insight, it would just seem to like go up of its own accord. So this is one of the very like minor environmental details that I really like that they included into the game. I think we could kind of take this principle and potentially apply it to like the password gatekeeper of the Forbidden Woods, or maybe even the addressee on the envelope to Canehurst, like the summons, and like probably a lot of the other more supernatural events, like how the door to Castle Canehurst opens as well. Of course, it doesn't like always work out to be so logical. Like it could just be like spooky Canehurst magic, which causes a lot of things to occur, and we just kind of have to accept it as it is. We're gonna go back to the Hunter's Dream, and we should be able to hear a different kind of theme going on in the background, and like I'll turn up the volume so we could hear the baby's cries, which should be going on right now as well. So I didn't hear the baby right now. Maybe you can't hear it in the Hunter's Dream. I'll probably have to test that like when we go back into the waking world. And Zuhu asks, does this mean whoever was appointed to the Hunter Chief was able to commune with messengers? I think so. Like, they were probably a previously dreaming hunter, and they were probably connected to the messengers. And it is important to remember when we go through like Central Yarnum and things like that, we do have the statues of messengers like all along the aqueducts. And I guess I could have shown it off in the Cathedral Ward as well. And something I forgot to do when we first came to this area and got the monocular. But there's also like a bunch of the messenger statue parts of the bridge by the monocular. So thank you for bringing that up. I do also wonder if the normal Yarnamites can still see messengers as they are, or if they only appear to the dreaming hunters. It's a little bit unclear, and I could see arguments going for that either way. Thought it was going to be a little bit slower. It's no big deal. And then of course we can always look back out to like Central Yarnum and see it from like the night cycle sky. So once we pull out this monocular, we can see the statues of what appear to be messengers all along like this outer wall for the Cathedral Ward. So there is that kind of religious iconography that is present throughout Yarnum for like messengers, and when we go into like Bergenworth and the lecture hall, we can even see like a statue of 4 messengers holding up a note, which I find to be pretty funny. Zuhu says, you'd say only dreaming hunters since some notes in the game are written on paper, not communicated through messengers. Yeah, I think that's a good possibility. But it's ultimately unclear. And to be fair, like, none of the townspeople like freak out that the hunter will just like pray to a lantern essentially and melt through the floor, so it's hard to say what the like normal people would make of everything. So now we can go to Bergenworth. The first time I was here, I failed to look through the like some of the more environmental details within the building itself. Like I mentioned in the lecture hall, like a lot of the things are repeated there. So I'll just show that off briefly as well. And I will try to turn up the sound again to see if we do get that baby crying. Alright, it was very faint, but it was there. I don't know how well that may have come through on the stream, but I definitely did hear it. It might have been in the Hunter's Dream, but like the quiet singing may have covered it up. Okay, so Ruby heard it too. Okay, that's good to know. So yeah, with the Hunter's Dream, like you no longer have the violin. It's some very subtle differences, and that music will also change after like Ram gets defeated and the Red Moon gets revealed. So I really did like to want to highlight that just because I think it all does tie into this note about the enlightening truth need not be shared, or true enlightenment need not be shared. So that note, or like in Japanese, the term for enlightenment is the same as insight, which I've mentioned before. So forgive me for being a little bit redundant. And so with the voice of Murgo being used to cry out and lure the Great Ones, that's kind of the story behind the School of Mensis and this particular night of the hunts. Because we came to the Forbidden Woods after killing like a bunch of bosses, I did neglect to talk to an NPC, although I believe they would have already been crazy. Uh, they're like in one of the houses, so it's not like one of the ones we can send to a safe space. In English, he says like every peep you make will bring us bad luck, amongst some other things. In Japanese, it's like a fukona koe o kikaseru nante, which is more like you're making us hear that awful voice. And I believe that could be a reference to her potentially hearing the cries of Murgo as well. And I don't think the translators may have understood that like the idea of that voice is being a significant portion of what's going on in the game, and they might not have like fully realized its relevance. And so in Bergenwith itself, we get the little fetus experiments, the infant experiments going on as well. I think my lanterns. Okay. And you can very vaguely like see these like little shapes of skulls coming out of them, and I think that could be related to what we will see in like Ritual Blood or what's on the Executioner gloves icon. That like once you have enough blood smeared on something, like the spirits or the wills, the echoes inside them can like start to come out or like manifest more in the material world. So I think that might be related to these infants, and like the more impure like the mother's blood may be, the more her child might get affected by that, and that may tie into why there's the phrase like the child of blood, or like why childbirth is a big deal, because the more great you become in this game, the less likely you are to be able to reproduce, the more advanced you are. That's something that Miyazaki did talk about in one of his interviews. So this desk is Master Willem's desk. We can see like it does match up with the cutscene for this area, although it's kind of hard to remember. We've got the statue of the four messengers holding up a note, which I mentioned before, and then we've got these like it almost seems to be half transformed statues that we can find throughout Bergenworth. Maybe of messengers transforming into something else or people. It's not clear. I think it could be related to the amygdala, because there are a bunch of these amygdala statues in the Forbidden Woods. They're also by the Celestial Emissary, or the Celestial Larva, the Celestial Infant statues in the Forbidden Woods, which I did forget to show off, but they show up in Yahar'gul. I don't think it's too important that I go out of the way to show them again. Just as long as we know that they're all there, that should be enough. If anybody like really wants me to do that, I will. It just takes a bit of time away from everything. So coming back to Bergenworth and going towards the lake, you've got the shining pool of water. Might be related to the moon, so we could assume like the moon is casting that kind of glow on this specific spot, or it could potentially just be like that glow comes from Ram. And it is also questionable whether this moon is related to Ram, and part of that is of what I mentioned in a previous stream, like when you're in the Forbidden Woods and look over Bergenworth, you can't see any moon whatsoever. So we plunge into the lake and end up in a completely different area. Obviously this couldn't be fully representative of reality, otherwise we would drown. We wouldn't stand on the surface of this mercurial kind of liquid. Whether it's water or mercury, it's not clear. I'm not sure I'll be able to choose her with like the threaded cane. It's not very good for building up the beasthood meter. So this is one of the first great ones we can come into contact with in the game. She's called Ram, the vacuous spider. Many people will interpret vacuous to mean empty, but the Japanese term for it is kind of like a bit of a slur, a little bit of an archaic one, which is why I think they went with vacuous to describe it. It does mean like profoundly mentally handicapped, so I do take this as evidence as like perhaps the great ones aren't necessarily as great as we think. They may not have such evolved thoughts. If Ram was granted eyes and she's vacuous, as in like disabled, and if Ebrietus's name is, if it came from like inebriation in Latin, and she's drunk or like she doesn't have full faculties, I think that's something very interesting to consider. It may be that the way that they became great ones was flawed, and the way we don't have a whole lot of evidence for definitive claims in that regard. It's just kind of up to fan interpretation of how they want to take the third ending of the game, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing or just a cyclical thing where we essentially replace the moon presence, or if we are greater than the moon presence and like a more perfect great one, since like we don't have our ribs exposed or all that kind of thing. Sure, we turn into a slug, but maybe it's a perfect slug. Who's to say? So when we examine Ram itself, we can see that she is covered with eyes. Her head does somewhat resemble that of an amygdala, just it has like a mouth and these jagged little teeth, which are kind of useless at this point in the game. She's got what look to be more eyes, like kind of covering her body, and this glowing flora coming out of her body. These plants. I don't think these are necessarily like tomb mold or cold blood flower buds. They're never really brought up again. They might be related to the kind of flowers that we can see in the Forbidden Woods. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. And then she's got like these long glowing tail-like things. So it could be that these plant-type things are just part of her body. And why they're like bioluminescent, we don't fully know. It could just be because she's a great one and it's a property of the arcane powers that she possesses. She's got these tiny little legs, so a lot of people think that perhaps like these larger ones were ripped out of her. She may have had larger legs because the statue near Ebrietus is very similar to that of Ram. And so one theory that I've heard tossed around quite a bit is Ram at one point had longer legs, but the developers took it out because it's too hard for players to deal with. Lance McDonald said he's found like no indication of that ever being a thing within the different builds of the game that he's had access to. I of course don't know what build he's had access to, but I'm inclined to believe him. If we strike Ram, her head is very resilient to like physical attacks and I think maybe all kinds of attacks, and it will bleed a silvery kind of blood. And if we attack her body, it will bleed a reddish blood. So it does fascinate me that she has two different types of blood within her body. So a lot of people think that kin blood is silver and like more related to pale blood. I don't personally buy into like or believe the serum theory put forth, I think, by Redgrave or Rikuyo. I do think like the colors of blood is important and can indicate some types of enemies, but I don't believe the whole serum thing, and I don't really know enough about it, or don't remember enough about it to explain it very well off the top of my head, and I don't want to misrepresent their arguments in favor of it. When we attack Ram, she will spawn down these little spiderlings, which are copies of her, which does bring questions of whether or not great ones do lose their children, because that doesn't seem to be true in her case. I think there was something else that I did want to mention about Ram, but I just can't think of what it is right now. she does use arcane attacks, and some people think she may have been a student of Willem's, or an ascended human, or not fully ascended Great One. Quite frankly, we don't have evidence to confirm or deny any of that. We can deny that she isn't considered a full Great One or an ascended Great One. Like, I don't necessarily think the game has any opinion about ascended Great Ones or things of that nature. It's just that her trophy does explicitly call her a Great One, even though she drops Kin Coldblood. And even though she drops Kin Coldblood, I don't think that's tied to her being a Kin enemy type. I think that's more a product of her being like this kind of invertebrate thing. And the idea of like Kin of the Cosmos is tied to eyes. And the trophy description for the Great Eyes Chalice does state that like Kin of the Cosmos are related to eyes. And Zuhu says white blood seems to be connected to high physical resistance. I think that's just a property of the Kin in general. Like the fishmen in the Hamlet DLC bleed at white blood. They are not Kin themselves, and they're not terribly resistant to physical damage. They just have like pretty high health pools. But I do like to entertain those kind of theories as well, so thank you for bringing that up. So yes, Rom is a Kin, and she has Kin Coldblood, which is very confusing, but it's adverse Kin, and so she's weak to Bolt and things like that. And I attribute it to just being a Kin of the Cosmos, and I think the idea of a Kin of the Cosmos should be taken separately as to what's talked about in Kin Coldblood. Yo, it's Q. The freak is that? Don't lie to me, boy. I know you've played this game before. This is Rom the Vacuous Spider. It's a great one, and we're about to murder it. And a lot of people are really reluctant to try to fight Rom because as we see her, she's very docile. She is not aggressive towards the player. One of the very, very few enemies that are like this. So they kind of think she's chilling, minding her own business, and we feel like, I don't know, we've kicked the family dog or something. This does not feel very self-defense oriented of a fight. And the whole reason that we need to kill Rom is to reveal what's going on in Yahar'gul so we can go into the nightmare and stop the cries of baby Murgo, which is beckoning the moon presence and therefore the red moon and causing everyone in Yharnam to go mad. So this is a very significant fight for understanding the story of the game, and I think it's really unfortunate that like a lot of the notes don't fully get that idea across in English. My boy gives dialogue to every boss fight. Yeah, a lot of people want to know what this is all about, so it's pretty fun to talk about. Alright, so here we go. I'm going to hit her head at first. It'll bleed the white, and she won't take like hardly any damage. I believe her spiders do spawn, like in the first form, and if not, well, we'll see how it goes. Okay, yeah. Her little spiderlings are like her as well. If you hit their bodies, they're really weak. And if you attack their heads, they're very resilient and strong. And they can do a lot of damage with their like plunging attack over there. I am definitely pretty over leveled for this area, being able to kill them in one hit from the side. And so if you have enough damage output at this point in the game, you can cheese Rom by using the Beast Blood pellet to enhance your damage based on like how much you're attacking. So I'm going to switch to my fist, pop a Beast Blood pellet, and I'll attack her head to let that Beasthood meter fill. Probably should have like equipped different armor. So I'm going to use Beasthood heavy armor. Oh, it seems like I've already got. A good set for it with the Executioner set. This has terrible arcane resistance, so if I screw up, this might not be very good. Alright, so hopefully this goes well. She's already kind of running away from us, which kind of does show like how kind of sad this fight is, like from just like a more empathetic perspective. but it's something that has to be done. So now that I've built up some damage, I'm going to attack her body. She'll try to teleport away. If you do enough, it should stop her, but I didn't. So I'm just going to try to kill her quickly. I put her into phase 3 already, so that's why there's a bunch of spiders over there. Now she'll have arcane attacks, which can do a ton of damage. And so at this point, it's more of like a hit and run. Ooh. I tried to dodge that, but it wasn't fast enough. She'll summon these kind of meteor things from the sky. You can avoid them just by running. She will begin to be more aggressive, using physical attacks to get you away from her. And with this, it's a real pain in the ass trying to kite all of her spawnlings and deal with her arcane attacks. Because if your camera is facing away from her, it's really hard to read her attacks. Like this right here. It's very easy to hit because it's long range. And as I said before, her little spiderlings can hit very hard with their like plunging attacks. Alright, so that's the fight. We cleaned her clock pretty well. We got blood raining from the sky. And as I've said over and over, she does drop the kin cold blood. And said, Ruby asks, is it just him, or do the meteors look kind of like tonsil stones? Yeah, I think that's a very good observation. And they're difficult to see properly, yeah. If we get the black sky eye orb later that shoots a similar kind of projectile, and we can kind of try to compare that to see if it's tonsil stone-like. After we defeat Rom in the distance of the kind of boss arena, we see a woman cloaked in white. And this is Queen Yarnum, the Queen of Thumaru, in which like the entire city that we're in is named after. Getting a little bit too close to her does trigger the cutscene. I would like to examine her for now, point out some things. On the front of her white wedding type dress is a kind of a blood stain where her abdomen is, where she could have had a child or perhaps a miscarriage. And she seems sad, looking down. And she has a reflection in the water, whereas we just kind of have a shadow. I don't think that's like super relevant, it's just something interesting to note. And when we get closer, she'll turn and we'll see the red moon get revealed after defeating Rom. The moon that's always been there the entire night. So the revelation of this red moon seems to cause us to pass out, and we hear the cries of the baby, which we were able to hear before because we had a high enough insight to perceive them. And now, even if we jump all the way back down to 0 insight, we'll still be able to hear the baby's cries wherever we go. Time to murk an infant. Very cool, Miyazaki. He really does seem to have it out for some infants, doesn't he? Especially him with like Osiris and Ocelot. So this note says ritual secret broken, seek the nightmare newborn. I do have a lot of issues with this note. The ritual secret sounds pretty bad to me, whereas I believe the Japanese says like a lot more explicitly like the concealment of the ritual has been destroyed. Or the concealment of the ritual has been broken. Find the nightmare infant. And like I don't really care that they call it a newborn versus an infant. That's completely perfectly fine. But just saying ritual secret broken, it doesn't necessarily lead into the idea that the rituals have been concealed. It just sounds like it's a secret. It's not that they've been hidden. Whereas like Yahar'gul is the hidden village, and that's where that whole thematic link is supposed to all tie together. And the most notable aspect of this in Japanese is this entire note slash quote is put into their equivalent of quotation marks. So this is literally being spoken to us, potentially by Queen Yarnum herself. So Queen Yarnum, it could be telling her, or telling us rather, to go look for that nightmare newborn, that baby that's crying, Murgo. And this is the amygdala, which teleported us to the lecture hall. We were able to see it in the cutscene. With the red moon revealed and having over 40 insight, we would be able to see this for ourselves as well. And now we gain access to the other part of Yahar'gul where this door was closed before. And then going into Yahar'gul, we have the statues that are found in the Thumerian Chalice dungeons, although they seem to be slightly different. Like the faces are a little bit misfigured. And they still have like all the like skeletal figures coming out of them. So we get confirmation this is Yahar'gul, the unseen village or the hidden village, and the spider was hiding all manner of rituals. So we hear the bells ring, and from those ringing, or that ringing rather, we get these Yarnamites who are covered in red materialize out of these pools of blood on the ground. When we attack them and kill them, they kind of explode into this black, nightmarish mist, which is another reason I do believe there is a strong thematic relevance to a nightmare mist in conjunction with messengers and the Nightmare of Mensis later on. I think it does have like that kind of a supernatural property which is related to death and reanimation. And unlike in the previous areas of the game, these enemies will respawn after a while. A little bit surprised they haven't yet. So just examining some of the statues. They are of the celestial larvae that we can find in the Forbidden Woods that I was talking about earlier. And then we've got some pretty big amygdalas as well. They're missing their left arms for whatever reason, and they don't really have their like back arms. It looks like they may have fallen off as well or into the sculptures. And this will become relevant very shortly. We see that pale blood sky of a sky drained of blood and the red moon in the background that was revealed to us by Ram. Hey Wonders, nice to see you again. Welcome back to the stream. We just killed Ram. I was talking a lot about her. And Queen Yarnum in the note right before coming into Yahar'gul. Lantern back to the Hunter stream. I'm not too worried about my echoes right now. If I die, it's not that big a deal. Like, I feel like we're strong enough for this area. And coming into Yahar'gul, we get some more of these skeletons who are wearing cages on their head, lounging on chairs who have already turned into mummies. This is likely a member of the School of Mensis, and they were able to teleport into the nightmares using these cages on their heads. And we will find more about those later. And so, one thing that I've been talking about with the amygdala statues and things like that ties into Yahar'gul because the town is completely covered with these amygdalae that are hanging out on tops of buildings and things like that. Some of these are more aggressive than the ones we'd find in, say, like the Cathedral Ward. And we'll show off some of those attacks later. Right now is a little bit of a dead end, but there's some items over here if I remember correctly. Then we're going to pick up. So even the wheelchair huntsmen have been reanimated by these kind of bells. They don't explode, but like the other ones do. So we get the Iron Yahar'gul helm, which ties into like the Yahar'gul set that we've already picked up from earlier. And this will be the shortcut that I mentioned much earlier in one of the streams that we can't activate ahead of time, and it'll just be a drop to our death at this point. Where's the stairs? There we go. You can like kind of oops, I got distracted. You can clip through. I think it's this spot right here to kind of like fall through the map and skip a lot of what's going on. That's more like a developer error rather than anything significant to the lore. I just did the same thing again. But just for knowledge's sake, may as well bring it up now. So that amygdala will grab us. Oh, the gun does a lot of damage. I don't remember if that one will give us insight when we get frenzied from it. I think I'll test it out just to see. And see if that's something a bit consistent between them. Hello Soda, nice to see you again. I assume you won't have class today. Oh god. Oh jeez. Playing badly. I forget sometimes that like once you backstep it'll kind of lunge in. I was just trying to do the normal attack. So I lost 44,000 echoes. It's not that big a deal. We've got a lot of echo saved up just from our cold bloods and things like that. Of course I kill Rom, no problem, and just immediately die to trash mobs. So I'm gonna run past these guys over here to kill the Chime Maiden that's in this room, who's continuing to reanimate these Yarnamites, and she's up the steps. So one thing that is very notable about these maidens is if you kill them, the Yarnamites around her will explode with that black mist. They'll become much weaker, and they will permanently stay defeated once they are killed. So to me that lends support to the idea that like they're filled with a kind of nightmarish mist which keeps them reanimated. It's pretty self-evident, but the hard part to connect together is that it's tied to the nightmares with the bells. So we get another messenger note, and this one is pretty significant as well. It says, "The Mensis ritual must be stopped, lest we all become beasts." And Soda says, "We just took the Chime Maidens as resurrecting the villagers." Yes, but the important takeaway to me is, like, the way that they're doing it is using the arcane power of their bells to draw like some kind of mist from the nightmare to reanimate them. And so this note talking about the Mensis ritual must be stopped is supposed to indicate that like the spreading scourge of beasts from like the note in the Hunter's Dream is tied to the Mensis ritual, which is why we have to progress through Yahar'gul to try to stop that Mensis ritual from the Cries of Murgo to make the moon presence and the pale blood sky go away. That's interesting because that's not a note. That's a note left by someone with a notebook, so likely a hunter, right? And of course, like there are a lot of notes that aren't just like normal notes in this game, or I said that poorly, but they're not like written notes, so to speak. They are left by the messengers. And so it could have been like perhaps there was a hunter on a previous night who failed in their attempt to stop the Mensis ritual. We don't know. So that one, oh no, did not give us any more insight, which is interesting to note. But there is indeed still a connection between frenzy and gaining insight. And I think that is all tied to the arcane, and if the arcane is in the blood, which is mentioned in the Kincold blood, I do believe that's how things like the, what do you call it, the blood dregs can still give insight, even though they're not like Madman's knowledges. So we get some bold paper from a random corpse. I will come into this building later. I'm just trying to collect this item now. And we got the plaza of the kind of women we can find in Hemwick. They are also being reanimated by these bell maidens. And this can be a really annoying area to deal with, so I'm going to go ahead and just try to run to the Chime Maiden and take care of things in there. And the Chime Maiden in this section of the game is a little bit hidden. You have to like fall off the edge of this cliff where there's like a little opening in this gate. It's a bit of a scary drop. And you can gain access to a... oh, did I just go down to the first floor? Yeah. So I need to go back. No sense doing this twice. Like killing all the enemies in there twice, rather. And Soda says, don't you get some frenzy by consuming Madman's knowledge? Well, not exactly. Your frenzy resist bar changes. So, okay, this is the entrance to it. So there's a reanimated brick troll waiting for us due to this Chime Maiden. Like I said, once you kill her, the mist flies out of her like supported enemies, and they become weaker. And they completely disappear as though they do not exist in the world. And that red aura shows that like they're being summoned or controlled by the Bell Maidens. The important reason why I came up here, not just to deal with the Bell Maiden, is there's a kind of a jail cell in here, and we have a very interesting corpse to look at from within the cell. From it we gain the upper cathedral key, and if we look at the what it's wearing, it does resemble that of Yuri, the choir member that we found in Bergenworth. So a lot of people will take this idea that since this member of the choir is locked into this cell, there may have been some interfactional struggles between the choir and the School of Mensis, and there may have been a kind of war. I don't think it may have been like an all-out war. It could have been like more of a scholarly dispute. We'll find out like from supplementary materials. A hunter in the Nightmare of Mensis is a spy for the choir. I think if there was a war, we would see like larger signs of like damage than what we get. Like a lot of it, what we do see tends to be more like things falling apart rather than like full-on bloodshed that you would expect at like a place at like Canehurst or something else. The frenzy meter ticks for a bit. That's a unique corpse. In your opinion, that choir member locked themselves in? Maybe, because like we do use the key from, or no, you just can only open it from the side. So yeah, that could be a good idea as well. They may have been in Yahar'gul, saw everything going crazy, and then closed the door to stay safe. But they kind of screwed up because, I mean, they became a mummy anyway. And it is interesting that they are a full-on like skeleton as opposed to just like a more fleshed out character. Ruby says academic dishonesty and intellectual dispute. Yeah. Linder says, suspicious of each other, I'd say, as enhanced by Damien of Mensis helping against Ebrietus, and I'm pretty sure you can get him to fight Yuri and Bergenworth. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so, like I've said before, I don't place like a ton of significance on the DLC Old Hunters. I tend to just prefer what was able to be summoned by the Beckoning Bell, like in the earlier patches of the game. And of course, if I can take the events of the DLCs being canon, like why not those things as well? I just don't think they all always had a ton of thought put into it. And I just take it as like they're the protagonists of their world, and that's why we can summon them. Like they're in the exact same position, so I don't think the Damien of Mensis is necessarily the Damien of Mensis of this world, if there is one. Yeah, so there is maybe a kind of Cold War of sorts going on between the two factions. In opening this chest, we gain another arcane hunter tool, the Tiny Tonitrus. Before I read that, I will examine that upper cathedral key. This is the key to the upper cathedral ward seal. The upper echelons of the healing church are formed by the School of Mensis, based in the Unseen Village, and the choir occupying the upper cathedral ward. This key brings one a step closer to the choir. I believe that translation is pretty well accurate. I don't think there are any discrepancies between the two. Right, okay. And now the Tiny Tonitrus. The Tonitrus is is a unique weapon crafted by Archibald, the infamous eccentric of the Healing Church Workshop. This is a similar Morning Star mace that utilizes quicksilver bullets. When struck into the ground, it recreates the blue sparks that are said to surround the dark beasts. Like Archibald's masterpiece, this too is a superb conductor of the powerful blue sparks. I don't think there's much else to say about the Tonitrus other than its description. It shoots bolts of lightning in a line, so it's more of a long-ranged attack. It does consume like a lot of quicksilver bullets, I think like 7 at a time, so it's not terribly practical. You need to use like your emergency bullets or increase the amount that you can hold to make a good use of this. I think as we continue on leveling up, I'll start like pumping up the arcane stat just because I'm pretty close to the stat cap for skill, and so that way we could like examine some of the effects of these weapons. I guess all the women went over there. More like the tiny cost too many bullets. Yeah. Mensis and Choir seem to send differently, but I'll elaborate, lady. I'm trying to say later, autocorrect or something. 6 bullets, fucking hell. At least it's effective against Winter Lanterns. You know, I never really thought about using it against those. That's probably a good idea. I could still imagine just like trying to deal with the Winter Lanterns is going to be a pain in the ass because of like their frenzy, their distant frenzy. So this goes back into the little building that I skipped before. This door is normally closed, so you have to come in through this way and kind of deal with like this brick troll in the background. He'll be a lot weaker now that we killed the Bell Maiden. And just to examine like some of the set pieces, it looks like we have kind of like lights that are deactivated. Maybe gaslit. It's a little bit unclear. Some more lights up there. And then like these clothed like square type things, I guess they might not be in here, are mirrors. Okay, so there aren't like any bits of fabric over these, but these are mirrors. So a lot of people like to think that perhaps mirrors had a relevance in getting the School of Mensis into the Nightmare, and that could also tie into like how we see the formulas for the refraction of light within the chalkboard in the lecture hall. And so this guy gives us the air rune. We've already looked at one from Henrik, so I won't examine it again. It's just of a higher quality. And like in the corner, we've got these almost hollowed looking like skeletons, like holding onto their heads, maybe praying, since they're facing the walls. And I think like the idea of the writhing and things going on in their heads will be relevant when we like go to the imposter Yosef gun a little bit. Some quicksilver bullets. And if I forget, do try and remind me to go back to like the cathedral ward and talk to the NPCs there before we encounter the one reborn. Just to because like time will continue to advance and they will change, and it's pretty easy to forget about that kind of thing if you're just progressing naturally. Rubito asks, I know your thoughts on the brain of Mensis potentially being stillborn brains of the Mensis scholars, but what about the Winter Lanterns? They seem like a bit of a lore black hole. That is a good point. I think that they could have been related to what happened to the brain of Mensis. They may have been Mensis scholars who weren't like amalgamated into that brain. They are a little bit of a kind of lore black hole. They do wear a kind of very similar outfit to the doll. So there are some chains of thoughts that like, hey, maybe the Winter Lanterns were dolls created by the School of Mensis and meant to be like a surrogate mother for Murgo that didn't fully work out. And like the doll could, in the Hunter's Dream, could have provided a similar role. But I think just like in general, getting a whole bunch of eyes or evil eyes and transforming into something terrible is still possible. So the amygdala over there already has its eyes like sticking out, and it will shoot this arcane laser that can even like hurt these enemies, and it does a ton of damage. So that one's automatically hostile, whereas a lot of them are not. And I'll examine that amygdala a little bit more once we get closer. We've already dropped down and dealt with the bell lady over there, so that's why all these enemies are dying and staying dead. Otherwise, this area is very annoying to deal with. There are certain safe spots for this laser, and you can kind of just sprint down the bridge, stay close to one side, and like zigzag to avoid where it's going to fire. Going to run to the left and kill the Wandering Madness that's going to scurry away. Very easy to miss. And try to get a better look at this amygdala. Oh, too high. I might have to go back up the bridge a bit. Pew pew! Is Fosefka dead or pregnant? She's going to be pregnant now after the Red Moon gets revealed. Oh no. Okay, there we go. So I think this spot should be safe. Right, okay. So its eyes are already out. All of the other amygdala have their eyes like retracted inside their head. This one has very long tentacles coming out of its face. A lot of people like to say this might be... I don't remember if they call this a greater or lesser amygdala. That's kind of more Fextra lore. Like, that's not supported by anything in the game. The amygdalan arm does say there are smaller amygdala, but there's no such evidence for greater or lesser or things like that. And so a lot of people say like the boss one is a greater one, and that's why they're hostile or things like that. Have I checked back on the Odin Chapel? Okay, no, not yet. I was going to do that, getting zapped by lasers. You definitely think the amygdala design looks much better with the eyes closed? I don't know. If you looked at like some of the alpha footage that Lance shows off, or like the network test designs of those kind of, sorry for that, the amygdala that appear like in Central Yarnum. because they were in those areas in like the network test. They took them out for the final game. I don't know why. Maybe to kind of like preserve the suspense going into more like of the cosmic horror type of enemies as opposed to like the werewolves in the first half of the game. So it says the amygdala looks awfully similar to what we look like in the Ascended ending. I don't know about that. More evidence to support why amygdalas are ascended humans, in your opinion? I think there's a very good argument to be made that like all great ones are, or at least at some point were, could have been humans.
There ain't no more survivors. Yarnum's done.
One thing that I do like about the Chapel Dweller is he will kind of retain his sanity no matter what phase of the night it becomes. We see Ariana now. She is still pretty hale, which is like healthy. She's got, excuse me, very blonde hair, and it's a little bit hard to make out. You gotta knock that over, but her stomach is still fairly slim. When we defeat the One Reborn, she will become like more visibly pregnant. She'll become more pale. Her hair will begin to lose a little bit of its color. It's bright blonde color.
Oh, there you are. Forgive me, I'm a bit out of sorts. So, no blood today, I'm afraid.
So at this point in the game, as she says, like she's not feeling well, and she won't give us blood any longer. So it is unfortunate that once you progress beyond a certain point, you can no longer gain the blood vials from these women because Adela will, well, we'll see. All right, that's enough of that. Like we get the picture. She's not feeling too hot herself, whereas the little old lady seems to be in the same kind of state. So we could have continued getting the sedatives, and that might have like led to the whole thing with the father.
Welcome home, dear. What's wrong? Anything you'd like to tell me? Oh my.
But maybe we can still do it.
But don't you worry. This'll help you forget. Forget your troubles. Forget your cares.
So she gives us 3 sedatives this time, so it is like a bit of a progression. It's kind of hard to show off, but if we like, maybe I can sit down. If you like look at her face, it is like a bit just like deformed, and her eyes are really messed up. It's a lot more noticeable in like the face lighters on like Mef's wiki, and she looks a lot like the narrow-minded man that would normally occupy this position. So, like, perhaps, like, the more common folk of Yarnum are more naturally deformed, whereas, like, more noble or refined individuals look more normal. So Adela, Ariana, and Adeline, all of their names, etymology does mean noble. So that's a kind of a tie between them and why they're all blood saints and why their blood is of good quality and can heal us and things like that. Looking back at the chat, we've getting Soda saying, look at the tendrils under the amygdala's head. We did point those out. The entire evolution theme on its own seems to heavily imply that great ones were human or human-like originally, in your opinion. There are a lot of people who take like the doll's dialogue about gods and their love and like how the gods created, or how humans created her, and so that might serve to say like, great ones created humans and the humans should love the great ones, but I don't buy that personally. But I can't necessarily like disprove it, or I do understand why people prefer that kind of reading onto the thing. I wonder if says her hand. Are you talking about the old lady? Or was it Ariana? Talking about like the way that like curves into her body or something? Which hand, like the one by her body? Should I talk to her again?
Oh, there's something wrong with me.
Just the shape of the bones that stand out, no matter. Okay. Soda says it's gray and pallid like our ascended form, but you generally agree with Rube. There is a case to be made. Almost all great ones we meet are ascended. In your opinion, Ebriatus is a great one? Well, that's just completely like refuted by the game text and like the trophy descriptions. She's very clearly delineated as the abandoned or left behind great one. Since we're already looking at NPCs, let's go ahead and talk to Gilbert as well. What happened to the narrow-minded man? He turned into a blueberry. Yeah. The doll isn't here. Maybe she'll give us one of Lance's coveted lines. Nope. So after we kill Rom, there is like a 0.5% chance for the doll to be praying at this grave and talking about Flora of the Moon of the Dream, or all that kind of stuff, which does paint the moon presence as being Flora, and that's who she may be praying to. Since I've already shown off what we can do with the inside, I'm just going to go ahead and buy like all the items at the messenger bath. Reduce some of that insight and show Soda like, oh, it very briefly disappeared, but yeah, there is a connection with having more insight does reduce resistance to the frenzy meter, which is completely tied into like the idea that like the more enlightened you are, the closer to going insane you are, which I really like about this game. It's very Lovecraftian and done very well. That being said, I do wish there was a little bit more to that insight mechanic and like making more like enemy behavior change or more things become visible, things like that. I'll just chalk it up to not enough development time to kind of refine or add more features to it. Soda says Ebriatus is an ascended great one. Oh, isn't an ascended great one. Oh yeah, this is Gilbert, guys. One thing which confirms that is, oh no, his little home's been broken out of, and we can it's pretty clear that he broke out of his home, poor Gilbert, because the bars on the window are bent outward from the inside. It definitely was not broken into. So this is the fate of our poor little sick man who was happy he could die human. And he gives us the claw mark rune, and I think this is the first instance of it. Gilbert is a beast patient, so this could signify that he had ashen blood. And so let's double check that rune. Okay, we did not get one before. So the claw mark is a carol rune that transcribes inhuman sounds. The claw mark is an impulse to seek the warmth of blood like a beast. It strengthens visceral attacks, one of the darker hunter techniques. Although the difference is subtle, Runesmith Carol describes the beast as a horrific and unwelcome instinct deep within the hearts of men, while claw mark is an alluring invitation to accept this very nature. So this does tie very strongly into what I believe Vicar Emilio is talking about with the honeyed whispers that the beast will give to people from like lurking from the depths. And when we were first transfused that blood in the beginning of the game, we had the beast come out of the pool of blood, come up to us as though it was beckoning towards us. And so if the idea is that beasthood can beckon towards us with its claws, I think that's exactly what this rune is supposed to like make us visualize in relation to what we've already experienced within the game. Souls is back. You're a bit late, but hi everyone. Welcome back. It's nice to see you again. Soda says, one more thing that's unfortunately hard to get is that as you progress the chalices, the Hunter's Dream gets darker and different in tone. Well, the Hunter's Dream only changes with like the 50 insight and once the blood moon gets revealed. And I suppose we can look at the sky of the Hunter's Dream. I should have shown that off before going to the red moon. It's just one of the things that's a bit easy to forget as you progress through the game. Because the skybox there does change as well. So thank you for bringing that up. I would have forgotten about that completely. And of course, now that the red moon is out, it's affecting Central Yarnum, and the sky is different here as well. It's a lot brighter, almost as though like the sun is out. We're going back to the clinic because I think like once you go through and talk to the fake Yosefka, everything changes. I don't remember if she closes the door behind you immediately, like if you leave that area. So we'll have to go back through the back route. And encounter some unsettling sights. When we encounter Yosefka before the blood moon, and if we did continue climbing up the stairs to see her, she would be hostile towards the player and attack them with a couple of the arcane tools like the Call Beyond. I don't believe she had the Black Sky Eye, but she also uses the Threaded Cane, and I don't think it was a normal. Oh, I was just trying to stab it. I think she also just has the Rosemarinus. Maybe that one's wrong. I don't remember what's in her left hand. I'm pretty sure it's the Rosemarinus, which would connect her more to the choir because I think that's what Yuri uses as well. Oh, you always thought that the Hunter's Dream changed as you did the chalices? No, I'm very confident that's not the case. It's just tied to the insight and the like the night phases of the game. Oh, she uses the repeating pistol. Okay, thank you, Enders. Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah, the repeating pistol and the threaded cane. Okay, that does sound right. And we already killed all our blueberry NPCs in here. So now we get to progress. I think I went too far. To the upper like level where. No, I was right. So yeah, poor Yosefka. Poor NPCs who we've deceived, led to terrible fates. Although it is arguable, like if we didn't kill them, maybe it really wouldn't have been that terrible a fate, all things considered. But, you know, since they're not human, like we as humans tend to like not really respect them so much. So I mean, I'm still a monster for having killed them, but the lore must go on. So coming into this back room, we get some really important dialogue, I think, from this imposter Yosefka, who is in a very questionable position. So we come up to her, she's no longer hostile, we can talk to her, and we can see her twitching in erratic, jerky movements.
God, I'm nauseous. Have you felt this? It's progressing. I can see things. I knew it. I'm different. I'm no beast. Oh, God, it feels awful. But it proves that I'm chosen. Don't you see how they writhe inside my head? It's rather rapturous.
So there is a lot of to unpack with that. She says that she can see things, and she talks about how they writhe inside her head. And I believe the idea of the whole writhing being connected to eyes on the inside from the brain fluid description in the lecture or the research hall, and the fact that she would give us like the Erden Writhe rune before the blood moon, and the concept of eyes on the inside are just all tied together, and
God, I'm nauseous. It's
she
progressing.
doesn't
I
say
knew
anything
it.
different, but when we kill her, like the terrible
God, I
people
know
that we are. I know I'm really killing the suspense there. She drops another third of umbilical cord, or another third cord. Oops. And considering that the umbilical cord can also be understood as a cord of eyes, I think that is very relevant to what is happening to Yosefka. A lot of people like to think, because of this description, which I'll just go ahead and read now. It says, "It is a great relic, also known as a cord of the eye. Every infant great one has this precursor to the umbilical cord. Provost Willem sought the cord in order to elevate his being and thoughts to those of a great one, by lining his brain with eyes, the only choice he knew if man were to ever match their greatness." So the whole idea of lining the inside of the brain with eyes to elevate one's thoughts into that of a great one, or a potential path into becoming a great one, is tied to what the imposter was saying. I just sorted it. Okay. About being chosen. A lot of people like to think that she may have gotten this cord from Bergenworth because it talks about Master Willem. The way that I read it is that it's just like the description about Master Willem isn't necessarily related to this cord, but just the idea of the umbilical cords in general. And the important part is like that it lines the brain with eyes on the inside. And try to catch up with chat. We have. Don't forget to talk to Eileen and fight the crow. Thank you. On top of the building with the Canehurst symbol, right? Oh, sorry. Do we think the use of numbing mist could tie her to Canehurst, or just something she acquired during her experiments? It's there's not enough details to say for sure. I think there can definitely be made arguments for both cases. That since she has like blonde hair and she was beginning to progress into a state to potentially come up with that umbilical cord for herself, like potentially being impregnated by Erden. Like Ariana, we could assume that she is tied to Canehurst as well. And since the Bloody Crow and Eileen are occupying the Grand Cathedral, we cannot warp there. So I do think there is a decent amount of evidence to claim that the fake Yosefka could have ties to Canehurst. They just aren't explicit by any means. But by that same token, it could just be like maybe she was just groomed as one of the Blood Saints by the Healing Church, and she was just of a higher quality than Adela, or perhaps the experiments she was doing put her on that level that's similar to that of Ariana, perhaps. So my thoughts concerning the fake Yosefka is that the umbilical cord is hers, and she didn't get that from Bergenworth. One of the reasons why I think that is because if we go to face Yosefka before the blood moon, there is no umbilical cord there. If we go to it after, she'll have it. So the whole question then becomes, when would she have attained it if it wasn't there to begin with? Did she just go to Bergenworth like after us while we were fighting Rom to get this? It's just pretty muddied in my mind, like how that all came to be. I know this guy won't chase me, but I just want to feel safe about it. so let me change my set again. Let's go with the Canehurst set just because this dude uses a lot of the blood damage and physical damage. I guess the gloves don't matter too much. I'll just leave the helmet for a little bit more physical resistance. So yeah, with the Yosefka thing, I just don't think there's a whole lot of clarity with if she got that umbilical cord, where or when she got it, especially since we couldn't find it in the clinic beforehand or in Bergenworth beforehand. The wooden shield is actually useful against the Bloody Crow. Yeah, but I just like to R1 stun spam my enemies. I don't think it'll be too bad, but yeah, he can hit extremely hard, even like towards the end of the game. Soda thinks the blue elixir is used to create the numbing mist. There is possibly a connection. They do have a very similar role as a kind of sedative or anesthetic, or it's used by the church to attempt to replicate it. It's interesting how the position she is in is very reminiscent of the old birthing techniques, right? And that's another reason why I think like it's something that she is herself developing over the course of the night. So, coming up to the Grand Cathedral, we find a familiar face in some dire straits.
Oh. Is that you again? I'm afraid I've made a bit of a blunder. I'm just going to have a short rest. Though, don't worry. I've taken blood. Enough to save an old woman. No more dreams for me. This is my last chance. What a fool I am. I'll have to tread carefully. But that thing still lies in wait. Turn back. This is my score to settle.
So Eileen gives us the wait gesture. This sets up that there's a pretty terrible enemy inside the Grand Cathedral if they are able to wound an accomplished old hunter, and more importantly a hunter of hunters, to the point of, you know, essentially dying. Like there's the whole trope of like, oh, just let me rest my eyes for a little bit, and then, you know, a person dying in cinema and things like that.
My prey lies in wait this way. Turn back. This is my score to settle.
So the other important thing about Eileen's dialogue is that she does say that she doesn't dream any longer, so that does explicitly confirm her as having been a dreaming hunter, and that's likely the role of all of the old hunters. And before we go into dealing with the crow, I will talk about how if we did not help her with killing Henrik, and we fought her in the Grand Cathedral instead of the crow, I'll talk about her dialogue. She says, "Look at you, you sorry drunk. I'll string you up like the filthy beast you are. You shall not abscond your crimes. Were you not once a hunter? Is this sincerely what you want? That's enough now. No one will blame you." And so if she kills you up there, she'll say, "You still have dreams? Tell the little doll I said hello." So like on her alternate quest line, it'll also confirm that she did once dream, and more importantly, she remembers the doll. If you kill her, she'll say like, "You can't go on like this." And if you attack her, she'll also say, "Few hunters can resist the intoxication of the hunt. Look at you, just the same as all the rest. The hunters must die. The nightmare must end. Only I can stop this madness." So I had screwed that up a little bit. The earlier dialogue that I read was if you attacked her in other places. This is what she does say in the Grand Cathedral. She talks about the nightmare. So It's unclear if she's referring to what's going on in the Nightmare of Mensis or just everything in Yarnum in general, and she thinks only she can stop it. Um, Once you knock away half of her health, she'll say, "The beast cannot be stopped. What good are hunters now? Your blood is mine, a hunter's blood for me. Your punishment is death, death to hunters. Enough of this terrible dream." And so, like, in Japanese, instead of saying terrible dream, she says nightmare instead. So, like, she will bring an end to the nightmare. And it's very clear that in that scenario, she herself becomes blood drunk. And she's been probably close to becoming blood drunk for a while with her, like, little chuckles of laughter. So it does lend some skepticism into whether or not Henrik had really gone mad or whether or not Eileen was starting to go mad. Like, of course, in this scenario right now, she doesn't seem as though she's that crazy, especially if she's taken more blood and it still seems lucid. So, now that I've talked about that for a little while, look back at the chat. Fosefka creates the Celestial Emissaries in an attempt to get the Great Ones to notice her. She wants to get pregnant, but she's totally aware of the consequences. Eileen's voice acting is Craigasm, whatever that is. I like how she refers to the crow as it, implying there's a beast. That could have just been something like in translation. They might not have known the sex of the person inside, but yeah, I do like that they went for it, because that's a very uncommon choice for localization too, and it does kind of lead to a quality of otherness in English, like subhuman or monstrous or things like that.
My prey lies in wait this way. Turn back. This is my score to settle.
Doesn't really look like she's going to be able to settle much of anything at this point. Like, we can still see that she has open wounds. She's extremely covered with blood. So even though she says she's taken enough blood to keep an old woman alive, that's very questionable. Like, once we kill the crow and come back later, she'll have some more dialogue to us, or for us, and then she'll kind of just go away completely after that. Soda doesn't believe that Henrik was blood drunk. He was just insane and didn't die a proper hunter's death. That's just kind of up in the air, of course. We don't know. And for a long time, I did think that, like, this blood was part of the battle between Henrik, or not Henrik, but the crow and Eileen. But I did show, like, the first time we came to go see Amelia, that this blood was already here when we came into the cathedral. He just went insane and didn't die a proper hunter's death. Well, that's all talking about before, like, we encounter Henrik, because he was so strong he couldn't, like, get killed honorably by an enemy. So just essentially another way to say he's a badass who lived a long time in a young man's profession. So the Bloody Crow of Canehurst is a very interesting enemy. He uses the repeating pistol, I think. He can also use the Old Hunter's Bone to gain the art of quickening, and his weapon is, oh god, the Chikage, which does tie him more closely to Canehurst. His chest piece is that of the Crow Hunter's garb, so he could have been a Hunter of Hunters, or he could have killed another Hunter of Hunters and taken their garb. He's a little bit of a mishmash of, like, all the different kinds of factions we can find. He's got a knight helmet from the Canehurst armor set. So, just offhand, he's got items from Canehurst, from the church, and from Hunters of Hunters. I don't know, like, what pants he has on. Could probably, like, find that out at, like, Mef's wiki or something, but it definitely wouldn't surprise me if it was from another set completely. So yeah, despite having, like, a whole bunch of, like, blood resistance, it doesn't necessarily help if I get parried like a casual. Can't exactly defend to a hand in the chest. God, yeah, I forgot how hard his gun hits. So, the Bloody Crow just, I suppose it's a testament to how high his blood tinge is, because he can kill you extremely easily with his gun, and like ours just seems like we're tickling him with a feather in comparison. Granted, like I haven't leveled up my blood tinge at all, but even if you do level up your blood tinge, it'll be nowhere near the level of the crows. We could also cheese the crow by like breaking his AI on the steps to the Grand Cathedral and like poisoning him with the poison knives. I'm not too big a fan of that. I do like the challenge of hunter fights in general. So I won't resort to that. Like, worst case scenario, I'll just come back to him later when we're a bit more leveled up ourselves. Because coming into him right after the Blood Moon gets revealed is a little bit difficult, even though we have gone to the side areas. So, he's also the Bloody Crow of Canehurst. Has everything night set. Being of something is the title nobody uses anymore. Bloody Crow is the one that PvP scrub that spams Chikage. He's a little bit of an edgy boy. The names of the guidebook aren't official apparently, but they fit him. Yeah, the guidebook, I think it's as close to official as we'll ever get. I do have some questions about like the idea that Edgar was a spy. Oh god, that was already like half my... Yeah, he killed me just with 2 shots. So I think next time I'll just pick up my echoes and just dip out. Like, we could kill him, it'll just seems like it's going to be a what do you call it? Wow, I'm really drawing a blank right now. I wasn't going to say like waste of time, but yeah, it's essentially what it's going to be. Or time consuming. Wow. That's pretty bad. Edgar is Choir Intelligence, not a spy. No, it's Choir Intelligenceer, which does mean spy. Essentially. Like, if you think about it like more objectively, like what does a spy do? They go out and collect intelligence. So I mean, it's a little bit kind of splitting hairs in my opinion, saying that like an intelligenceer is not a spy or anything like that. You think there's a semantic difference? I a little bit disagree with that. Fair possibility is a spy regardless. And then Rubito just kind of quotes what an intelligenceer is. This guy's probably gonna kill me. Oh my... Oh jeez. I should just leave these echoes, shouldn't I? Or be aggressive, I don't know. Soda thinks he's literally just gathering info. It's the literal definition of a spy. Yeah. Souls at Zero thinks it fit pretty well that he's a spy. I like the idea that if Mikolash was, or like if Abriates was Kos at some point in development, the idea that with Mikolash praying to Kos, he could have been unknowingly praying to Abriates, who is literally just underneath the Grand Cathedral, hidden from him by the choir. I find like a lot of hilarity in that level of irony. And one thing I did forget to show off is like the lamp to the Hypogean jail is inactive at this time because it's been broken. So we have to first traverse the Yahar'gul Unseen Village, go through the chapel, and then we'll get down to that lantern, but we can't activate it again. Soda says the Bloody Crow is harder than any boss in your opinion. I don't know, Orphan of Kos is pretty terrible itself. So is Ludwig. And Maria gives a lot of people trouble too, but he is certainly up there. So we kill that Wandering Madness. And then we get some more of the children in these chairs and the cages on their head. And so one thing that I take away from there being like the child-sized corpses is that the choir or the orphanage was working in conjunction with Mensis to some degree. Like, I don't think this was a sacrifice, although maybe there are shackles on it. Maybe not this one, but like the adults kind of like have shackles on them. But we have another amygdala hanging off the chapel in Yahar'gul. This one is completely docile. It will not attack us. We cannot like shoot it and do damage. I think there might have been another wandering madness that I heard scurrying away. Maybe that might have just been like the dogs. So we've got a sniper, his 2 ghost dogs, and the Bell Maiden kind of chilling out back there. He's reanimated some more Yarnamites over there. They continue to explode when we kill them. Someone should count the number of winter lanterns and compare them to the number of lone corpses and chairs with cages on their heads. There's definitely a lot more lone caged people, I believe. Especially if you can count like all the ones by the Advent plazas, like by the corpse of Mikolash. But I suppose you did say the lone ones, but yeah, I know. Jerk's Hands Frontier had like an idea that like at one point in development, these were enemies that would appear in like the cages of the Nightmare of Mensis where all the books are. I have not seen any evidence to corroborate that information. I think it's a really cool idea, but unfortunately I don't think there's anything to support it. So this goes back into the like shortcut area I talked about much like the first time we came to Yahar'gul. This is where that lantern was, and we can see it's broken. We get another corpse of the child underneath that of the amygdala, which has been given a lot of veneration here. We no longer have snatchers roaming this area, although we do get reminders that the nightmare ritual is with the newborn, to find one, silence its herring cry. After like the revelation with Ram and Queen Yarnam, it should be clear that it's like the nightmare newborn, not just a newborn. They literally use kids more as fuel to try and commune with the Great Ones, super messed up. I think that was just them trying to gain access to the nightmare. I don't think that these children were fuel, so to speak. Like they will also appear in the nightmare as well, like right before Murgo's wet nurse in the loft. And so there are, I think, 3 hunters here. Like a beast claw hunter and another one in the back. I don't remember all of their weapons, and they are much easier than like the bloody crow. Like the hard part is just trying to manage all 3 of them, because I think 2 will aggro immediately. Maybe it's 3. Is the 3rd one outside in front? I don't remember where the 3rd one is. I don't think you can even sneak up for like the easy visceral, although I might be wrong. Okay. So this is a Beast Claw guy. We can only gain the Beast Claw in Loran. Oh shit, was he behind me? Yeah. Okay, so I think that guy's under the stairs. So that was the Tiny Nitrous, which I mentioned before. He has the black like Yahar'gul set on. The other dude was like bare chested, although he doesn't transform like what we can get the Beast Embrace rune. So there is a connection between like Mensis and Loran in general. Between like the Beast Claw hunter there and this village being like covered with sand and some of the concept art that doesn't really get fleshed out, and just like lightning and like the dark beasts in general. So I've been dying a little bit more than normal. It's okay, like we all make mistakes. get better, get good. That's the motto. Just don't give up, and as long as you don't give up in a Soulsborne game, you'll like never die, canonically. Which is something I really like the Ludo narrative of, even if it can be like a little bit corny, I suppose. They're much easier than the Bloody Crow. Well, they are. Like, I didn't die in 2 hits. It was 3 hits that time, you know? And they had to mob me to do it. Like, I almost killed the Beast Claw guy. Archibald worked for Mensis, in your opinion? I wish there was a bit more information. Wow, I'm surprised they didn't, like, come out and gank me immediately. Oh, he's got a flame sprayer too? That's interesting. Oh, and I think the other one has the cannon. Did I get him? Damn it. Well, that's not what I was trying to go for, but I'll take it. Alright. So I forget that I did equip the Impurity, or the Canehurst rune before. And that's why I got the Blood Dreg from that one hunter. So with the one down, he won't respawn, and then the other 2 will be a lot easier to manage. So it says the Souls game have really great ludonarrative harmony. I will agree with that for sure. They are very consistent in that regard. Bad dog. So the Bell Maidens do have like these little silver daggers that they'll attack with. They can also use like arcane type spells with their bells. Oh, and it's interesting that they show up in Yahar'gul because when we were in Canehurst, we saw like the portrait of a very young Bell Maiden. So it's not explained how they're tied to Canehurst and the School of Mensis, especially because the one of the chalices does say that they are Thumerian madwomen. So there's a good possibility that these Thumerian madwomen were part of Canehurst or went to Canehurst, and I don't exactly know how it all ties together, but it's really interesting stuff. Yeah, and the Bell Maidens are Thumerian, so I don't know why that one didn't trigger the visceral, but whatever. Not the cannon? Okay. So, is that the rifle no, I'm not sure what weapon that is. The Saw Hunter Spear? Okay, just miss. So we got 3 blood dregs from those dudes. I don't think they drop vermin. I might be wrong, and this might have been a mistake. Pretty confident they don't. And we get the Madman's Knowledge from 1. So we have not gotten the blood dreg drop yet, so let's examine that as well. Looking at the icon, they do kind of resemble sperm. I think like if I could zoom and like enhance on the stream, I would. But they also look like they could have potentially like little faces of like ghosts in them. It's kind of a Rorschach test, honestly, but that's just one of the things that I've seen when you zoom in on them. Rifle spear, it is a rifle spear? Okay. So the vile bloods of Canehurst, bloodlusting hunters, see these frightful things in cold blood. They often appear in the blood of echo fiends, that is to say, the blood of hunters. Queen Annalise partakes in these blood dregs offerings, so that she may one day bear the child of blood, the next vile blood heir. I have brought this up before. The idea of bearing a child did get altered in the Japanese into embracing a child. So that is also something which comes into play with the blood dregs. I want to double check the description in Japanese real quick. Instead of dregs, it's called like the blood impurities or impurities of blood in Japanese, so that is more explicitly related to the quote-unquote impure blood clan. So like the idea of vile blood is a bit strong in English, but this is like a very clear connection in Japanese that, oh, blood impurities is connected to the blood or the impure blood clan and things like that. So it often appears in the blood of echo fiends or hunters, is important to note. It's the dying wills of blood. And Annalise does imbibe these blood dregs to potentially have some connection with that child of blood. The Japanese for that does say it's just for the wishes of the blood clan are for a child of blood to be held within those arms. And so like the whole idea of the child of blood and virgin births does make like a lot of sense if these blood dregs resemble semen. Perhaps like once I really don't know how to phrase this well. Well, like once the queen has enough of the blood dregs, she can begin to bear a child of blood for her own. So now that we're in the blood moon phase of the night, the enemies here are different. We've got these terrifying corpse beasts that are very reminiscent of the Scourge beasts, but they seem to be made out of the bodies of a ton of like corpses, really. Like its tail is literally like a leg sticking out of it. It's a really grotesque monster. And it's never explained how these things came to be. They were not in Yahar'gul the first time we came around. I don't remember if these are a beast type enemy. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they were. They do have like a little bit of fur on them, but there's nothing like natural about these whatsoever. But that being said, like maybe they came out of like the little sacks on the backs of the snatchers, because if they were collecting people, maybe they ended up like stuffing multiple corpses in their sacks over there, and they congealed into those kind of monsters, and their own sacks are what ended up like killing them. Like it's covered in blood. We've got the corpse of one of the dead snatchers, potentially killed by that beast in there. There used to be 2 snatchers when we came down here the first time, and we can't find any trace of the other one. So maybe that corpse beast is a snatcher as well as whatever was in its bag. There's no official source saying one thing or another about it. We already killed Parl, nothing changes over there. And when we look back at chat, it seems like sperm for sure. Annalise wants to create a blood child. I think in earlier versions of the story that's 100% true. I think it did get walked back a bit though. Rubito says it sounds crass, but semen imagery is very prominent all throughout Dark Souls and Bloodborne, especially with souls and blood dregs. Yeah. Kind of like Formless Erden, it foreshadows the One Reborn in your opinion, or to be honest. What happens to Adela if we don't save her, by the way? She will be collapsed on like the streets out here and dead. Meph was in the other day and confirmed that it was in Yahar'gul that we can find her corpse and not Cathedral Ward like I had originally been thinking. So we go back to the outside of Yahar'gul, and the pigs that we had earlier have been replaced by these terrible, terrible creatures called cramped caskets, or and the whole idea is like the box that it's in is like a coffin or something, and the corpses that got shoved into it have just kind of all congealed into these terrible abominations of undead corpses. So I did point out the first time we came through Yahar'gul there was stuff going on that we couldn't see, or potentially that gets changed as we go throughout the area. That like glowing corpse skeleton thing was one of them. Get rid of that little sniper guy and the Bell Maiden who reanimates the corpses in this area. The women also do drop the Quicksilver bullets a lot, which connects them to the arcane, potentially. And then we can finally access the one shortcut that I talked about so long ago. This brings us back up to the area where we had this Yarnamite and the wheelchair man over there. And then going back down, we can like jump out of this prematurely to go to another area which will warp us much deeper into the level. I won't do that quite yet. Because even though there's not like a ton going on back here, it's worth looking at. Maybe that's why the coffins are locked. Yeah, that was one of the ideas that I've had before. Right now we're on like this carriage that had been immobile before. Now it's shaking around to foreshadow that there's something not quite too normal going on with it. Never really use Molotov cocktails so much, so should probably buy a few more, but whatever. Oh, got trapped. I deserve that. Rubito thinks he mostly agrees with Erdgrave's take on the cramped caskets and corpse beasts being the result of the Bell Maidens coming out of the nightmare and resurrecting things like crazy. That is a very good possibility. Like I do not rule that out of the question whatsoever. It does. It is interesting that like we don't get like the kind of cramped corpses or like the corpse type beasts in the chalices so much though. Maybe in like the root ones, although I don't really deal with the non-story ones just because I feel like having dealt with like all the story ones, I didn't really want to go with the random ones. It's a little bit unfortunate how that kind of works out. Some blood vials. I'm not going to worry about the guy chasing me. I'm just going to go through the shortcut area. Mantis Hunters kidnaps people, which could explain all the weird Frankenstein beasts. Yeah, that's also a possibility. We don't have the Thumerian women when we first come through the area, and they're here now. But except for like, a lot of people wonder if the School of Mensis is connected to Thumeru, or like how or why these women are cooperating with them, and everything like relating to the One Reborn and what's going on in Yahar'gul right now just does not have a ton of information to help explain what's going on. It's kind of a lore black hole, and this place more than any other I think is just left up to a headcanon and fan interpretation and personal preferences. I mean, I've got some ideas which I think are more along the lines of educated guesses, for how some things might function. But not a whole lot of concrete information, unfortunately. So the pig that was over here is no longer here. And we don't ever see the corpses of pigs in this area. Like down in the chalices, we can find like pigs in big old stacks. We get another corpse of a snatcher with some more chunks coming off of it, which are always nice. So now that we did clear out like kind of the more annoying enemies, just to go back to these like little skeletal things. It's clear that chiming noise is coming from these skeletons, which makes me think, like, since bells can traverse worlds and things like that, the chiming is something that we get from, like, the aura from Ebrietis, from, like, the insectoid attacks of the Gardens of Eyes that inflict frenzy. I think these could potentially be, like, some kind of spiritual amplifiers for the rituals that are going on right now, that might be connected into like summoning the One Reborn. But again, there is no concrete information about that. That's just kind of what I think could be going on. One fun thing about those like little glowing corpse things is you can kite these cramped caskets into them to inflict like a kind of like golden flame damage. I think if they get hit 3 times, the fires on them do go out. And some people had thought for a while that like, hey, maybe there's a kind of hidden mechanic between these corpses and the One Reborn, like maybe they affect the attacks it can do. Unfortunately, I have not found anything to support that idea. So when they do get caught on fire, they stay on fire for a while. Some really nice like hidden mechanic that I enjoy that they added to the game. Since we already came here earlier, there's nothing special over here. We already picked up the items. It's just that I did mention the first time through, like you can't even walk into these things. And, like the ground is different. Like they're almost in these kind of bath-like structures. This resembles what we find when we get teleported by Rom and to Yahar'gul, like the front entrance. So it's a little bit unclear how that all worked out together. The Bell Maidens definitely seem to originate from the Nightmare Frontier, but you're unsure how they got to the Waking World / Dream. Well, there is the paintings of them in Canehurst. They are described as mad, like Sumerian women. Just like another Snatcher corpse. So their overall roles really are a bit of a mystery. It's unfortunate. I wish there was more that we could work with to figure that out. And of course we come back to like my favorite, most unclear note in the game. Behold a pale blood sky. Now is when Miyazaki said like the meaning behind this note should have been clear, although it's most definitely not, and he admitted to that. The idea behind it calling it a pale blood sky is that the purple color around the moon is indicative of a like body drained of blood. So like if a corpse was drained of blood, I don't know exactly how Miyazaki came to that conclusion. Maybe he has a dark past that nobody knows about. If like it becomes purple or pale, that could tie into like why it's a pale blood sky and not necessarily like a pale blood moon. And so the idea of draining a sky of blood or draining a body of blood leads into like the whole Alzamatachi, which is paled blood, and why it's connected to the moon presence. Behold, the pale blood sky is one of your favorite phrases. In your opinion, the pigs in Yahar'gul are the pigs in the nightmare that somehow got transported there? It's not a terrible idea. There are a few more pigs in the nightmare mensis, but that's an interesting thought process for sure. And so the gates to this area were closed the first time we tried to go through Yahar'gul, and now they're open. So it is a little bit annoying that we had to go like through that whole section rather than being able to warp to that chapel and just come straight out here from before. But I also do like how it set up the area to be different than what it was, and how that affects our expectations of things. Even though the execution might have been a bit lacking, like I do appreciate that kind of effort they put into it. So I'm gonna try to run past the Scourge Beast and show off that shortcut that I've been talking about earlier that I skipped. This is a bath. We can inspect it. Not a normal kind of bath, I know. They do resemble like the like little mound where those like flaming skeletons were. And when we try to access the bath, it will teleport us to another area. So this also ties into the ideas of like liquids being connected to supernatural forces, potentially dreams and nightmares, and the arcane in general. When we come out, there's going to be a couple dogs. Oh, there's one hit. The one hitter quitter. I'm not sure which Bell Maiden keeps these ones alive. So this just is the shortcut where you can ride the elevator up and jump out. And then like down here we get another corpse beast and some chunks as well as a madness, I think. I might need to reload the area. Oh, I was too loud. You can treat these things pretty similarly to the Scourge Beast, like you just jump behind them, or rather to the side of them, and you can stun lock them with R1s. They just have a really high health pool for most of the enemies in this area. So I'm gonna go ahead and reset just to get the madness. I think it drops some chunks, which are always nice. It might be the Bell Maiden from below, like where the Hypogean jail area was, which deals with those dogs. Okay, there it is. Okay, whatever. Yep, 2 chunks is a pretty good drop, worth resetting for in my opinion. And so that would be the shortcut area. We do get some of the like praying statues again, covered with the skeletons, all centered on the bath. So there's probably a bit of religious significance to it that we don't really get to see anywhere else. So this is a bit of the same, and then the one corpse beast was over here. Oh no. The messengers come from Bath? Yes. So this little building will be dark and little bit hard to see. There's going to be a guy on the steps over there. Nothing up top. And there'll be a Scourge Beast waiting for us at the bottom. See his little foot sticking out, and we can visceral them. And then the corpse might have been feasting on has a blood gem of a pretty high quality, tempering damp one. And one of the more fascinating parts of Yahar'gul in general is we get this imagery of like people or skeletons coming out of these walls as though they're running away from something in complete terror. Like the look of terror is still stuck on their dead faces. They're literally trying to crawl over each other to get away from whatever it is they're trying to escape from. Some of them are look more like common Yarnamites. They have a pretty like plain. So one of the thoughts that I have like regarding these I won't even call them statues. These skeletons could be like if the people of Yahar'gul were sacrificed. One idea is that their souls or spirits or whatever you want to call it they might be what comprise the Nightmare of Mensis, because we will get these kind of like boulder-esque stones that pop up, and they look like they're like the crying skulls of like faces similar to what we can see down here. Soda says the messengers comes from Bass. Just thought it was interesting to point out. Thank you for that. I would have forgotten. These look like messengers too. Well, yeah, I agree. I think messengers are, or should be understood as spirits of the dead. Like Shisha means messenger or emissary, and it's a homonym for, or homophone for a deceased person. So yeah, oh shit, it's all coming together, and like the idea of just spirits being in the blood, and like in Ritual Blood 5 especially, it really should just tie into like everything is related to death. Like the supernatural is tied to death, and that's kind of like my overall theme for how I interpret the Bloodborne lore. And I know a lot of people can disagree with that. They're welcome to. It's just how I see it. I probably shouldn't be doing this. So yeah, I probably should have planned that out a little bit more. Oh, he's revived. I will kill all of them just a little bit more systematically, you know, a little bit more safely, hopefully. I'm just gonna get rid of the Bell Maiden. And we can see like her bell creates like this ripple in the world, potentially like summoning things from the like a different dimension of the nightmare. Killing her causes the nightmarish mist to fly out of them, and they get summoned through like these pools of blackish blood that are potentially dried blood on the ground. A death is a part of that, which is why it's so talked about and discussed in the game. If anything, Bloodborne seems principally concerned about the nature of rebirth. Right, so like there's like the whole idea of like cycles in general is it's tied to life, birth, death, and rebirth. And we can hear like the little chimes of like one of the fiery skeleton boys. In this area, we do have this kind of ambient sound of like chanting going on, and it does seem to be coming towards the direction of the blood moon. Which is interesting to point out. It's most likely tied to the Bell Maidens who are trying to summon the One Reborn. That sound effect will go away once we complete the boss fight. And then, of course, in the different areas of this level, we've got the petrified remains of these Yarnamites running away from some unseen horror that's never fully explained. Rubito says they're whispering a song of Ice and Fire spoilers in your ear. That is indeed the nature of madness and insight, isn't it? It's from when Miyazaki was hanging out with George R.R. Martin, giving those Elden Ring deep lore takes. By the way, what, Soda? The chime sound effect with the Bell Maidens is the same chime as Ariana's Blood makes. Yes, that is something that I like to bring up over and over again. The idea of the sound of the bells and the blood, and that is also the kind of sound that you hear when you level up using your blood echoes from the doll. I suppose I didn't mention it. It should be a little bit obvious by this point that these cramped caskets will like spit a kind of blood at the player in a very long-ranged attack that's super annoying to deal with. And you see like their bodies expand, like they're taking in the breath to force that projectile out of them. So there should only be one more enemy, and even though there's nothing really super crazy going on here, just like for the sake of completionism, we're gonna take care of it. So we can get a clearer look of everything that's going on in this area. So we've got the Yarnamites lining up both sides of the street, trying to get away from something. So whatever it was seems to have been like in the dead center of this little, I don't know what to call it. I don't want to call this a plaza, like this avenue, maybe the better term for it. And they're all over the place. Like, it's very unclear how they came to be like lifted so high off the floor. So it almost seems like they've been sucked up and away into something as they were trying to escape from whatever was terrifying them. And as I said a little bit earlier, I think the connection we're supposed to draw is like perhaps the Nightmare of Mensis itself is made out of like the petrified remains of these Yarnamites. And that will be a little bit more obvious once we get to it, which hopefully should not be very long. Although I guess there is like the upper portion of the lecture hall and there's a lot to talk about there. We should definitely get there in this stream. So we look up at the moon. It's covered with some clouds, and the moon is also covering up some clouds behind it, which is very different. Like, no cloud should be behind the moon in real life. So I think this is more of a cinematic thing. Like, I don't think the entire moon itself is covered with this. It's just a floating orb in the sky, and they used the camera to make it look like it's covering the moon. And as it gets clouded over, it becomes more reminiscent of the cosmos or a galaxy or space. And so the idea that like the arcane or the nightmarish type black mist is related to the cosmos is kind of reinforced through this type of imagery. And what emerges from it is kind of reminiscent of like a childbirth of a very abhorrent abomination of a creature called the One Reborn. In Japanese, instead of being One Reborn, it could be a bit ambiguous, and it could be the Ones Reborn. So some people think that this could be like the reanimated remains of a Great One. It's like I mentioned earlier, we get extremely little information about what's going on in this area, the boss included. Good, I didn't knock her off. In the internal files for the game, the One Reborn is called a failed false god, or what I would say is an evil god, like a Jashin. And there's another enemy which shares the same kind of name. The evil god, or the Jashin, is the internal name for the amygdala. So it could be that the One Reborn itself is a failed attempt to recreate an amygdala, potentially using like people in their nightmarish rituals. And so like these Chime Maidens, they will be active throughout the fight. I think I don't know if they really heal it, I haven't seen that so much, but they will be casting like fireballs that can hit the player and can be really annoying to deal with. This guy has like a lot of lock-on points. He will drop like skeletons from the sky to fall on the player. Oh no, not this. And he can also occasionally create this ooze that will cover the entire floor of the arena and deal like damage over time. I died to that like my first time playing him because I couldn't see it, like I didn't know what was going on. I hear there's like a lot of comparisons to a Tower Knight. Oh, I'm on the wrong side. And from Demon Souls, just like the way that this fight is set up. I haven't played Demon Souls, so I can't say if that's true or not. I mean, I'll just take everyone at their word for it. So, this guy has like a lot going on, and even though it isn't like a really hard fight, it's pretty easy to like get caught unaware. I like a lot of things if you don't know it very well. So we got that like little ooze coming out again. I guess it wasn't like that big of a deal this time. That he's doing like the huge AoE. I'm almost out of blood vials actually. Oh no, I'm on the dot. Yeah, okay. See, it is a little bit hard to make out at times. It is my fault for like going out in the center like that. Bells sound like Bells Revolutionary. According to your headcanon, the One Reborn seems like a failed experiment by the School of Mensis to create a great one. I think that's a good interpretation of what could have happened. The brain of Mensis is the experiment conducted successfully. I think even the brain would be a kind of failure in that regard. And it is also good that you mentioned the brain of Mensis, because I think I was going to forget about it. The brain of Mensis shares the same kind of assets that's used with an amygdala. So I think there we can make in conjunction with the One Reborn would be that the brain of Mensis could have been like the head of the One Reborn if it's a failed attempt to create an amygdala, and the One Reborn could have been its body as the rest of the amygdala. I don't think that is what we really get in the final version of the game. That might have been something that they were thinking about in like earlier points of development maybe. But that's just pretty much all we can really work with based off of the very limited information we get from the internal file names. Wait, did I miss an item? Yeah, I think I missed that rune. Okay. So there's a rune over there. I'm pretty sure that one's the rune. Oh. Was not paying attention. No, that thing's in the way. I mean, I obviously don't intend to die, but if I do, I'll just use the other lantern and use that shortcut instead. Alright, so debating whether or not to try to go for that item now. I think I'll just try to wait for it after the boss fight, maybe. So I can keep my blood vials high and, yeah. That's annoying. That's doubly annoying. Sad they they ditched the old design for the one that has messengers reaching out of it. Are you talking about like the moon presence? Probably did mention that, but it's a little bit hard to keep up with chat right now. Fog walls. Also, after killing Tor, don't forget to go to the upper cathedral ward. Thank you. Just killed the FPS right there. Try to pop some beast blood pellets. Oh no, probably not the AoE. Nope, I'm just freaking out for nothing. So I should have used the beast blood pellets the first time. I was just being a little bit stubborn. So it kills the FPS as well as the boss. It drops a yellow backbone, which is another ritual material. I'll try to take a look at that after we access the lecture hall and things like that. I just don't want to forget about the item. I think it's just like another sea or lake rune, if I remember correctly. Wonders has to go. Thank you for the stream. See you tomorrow. Thank you for joining me again and talking to the chat. I do appreciate the continued support from everyone who shows up, and even the lurkers too. Some frenzied cold blood. Oh, that was not even worth. I think. I don't remember if we went over here. Okay, there it is. I knew there was one in the corner. Arcane Lake. Okay, yeah. Now we're doing the old Tecmo Super Bowl run. Oh, they got me. Alright, that wasn't too bad. Now, let's check out that backbone, which is really minor. So the yellow backbone is a special material used in a holy chalice ritual. The special body parts collected by the healing church. What was this gruesome... why can't I read that? Bait. What was this gruesome bait used to lure? The additional rotted offering beckons ungodly forces, normally terrifying things, but also worthy prey for a special hunt. I don't know if that's very clear to like other people, but I just kind of have a little bit of issues like understanding what exactly it means by that. Like you can kind of figure it out with like some context. As normal, I'll say I think the Japanese is a little bit more clear, a little bit more explicit about it. It says, from additional fetid sacrifice rites, irregular beings appear. They are normally fearsome, but should become the target of a special hunt. So, I think that's a lot clearer that, like, by using the backbone as sacrificial rites, it alters the enemies that we will find in the chalices. I almost just forgot exactly what I was going to talk about and YOLO'd it to Mikolash, but coming into the Advent Plaza, and Advent is like a Judeo-Christian term to talk about like the rebirth of Jesus. Like that idea is tied into the one reborn, something being reborn. Even though it could be multiple things, it could be the ones reborn. So it could have been like the people that were petrified in the walls throughout Yahar'gul that could have been like resurrected into the form of the one reborn, perhaps. Before going into like the little chapel behind it, we've got some more celestial larvae featured on like the statues in front, as well as like these kind of like transforming statues on the sides. We get more amygdala beast type imagery over there, which is something that doesn't show up except for like in other places in Yahar'gul. So whatever is going on with Yahar'gul and the School of Menses, they really do tie themselves to revering whatever is special about the amygdala. It's a good possibility that what is going on with their like cages could be related to the tonsil-like features of the amygdalan heads, and that could also tie into what Rubito noticed with the meteors that Rom shoots. They might be in the shape of a tonsil as well. So like this lattice feature is what helped them reach the nightmare, as we will find out once we obtain one from the corpse of Mikolash. And Mikolash himself is wearing the School of a Student uniform from Bergenworth. So a lot of people like to think that Mikolash didn't really belong to the Healing Church, or the School of Mensis might have been a bit separate, but it is stated multiple times that the School of Mensis was part of the Healing Church. So that's just something I go with. Perhaps it's a very old sect of the Healing Church where they didn't really get their own uniform designs until like much later, and so they just kind of kept with the scholarly articles of clothing. Inspecting the mummy, it says, will teleport us to the lecture hall, which we visited before, but now we can access the second story. So you guys say the One Reborn is Tower Knight 2.0. You'll talk about the Brain of Mensis later, but you think the Brain of Mensis is only a failure if you look at it. I will talk about that later, obviously. Probably not this stream, because we've only got about a half hour left if we're trying to stay close to 3 hours. Before Wonders left, he asked, perhaps you already answered the matter, but does the Japanese also read that the Brain of Mensis was found by Mensis? That is ambiguous. I think, well, I will talk about that in a lot of detail when we get to it. Like a lot of detail. My short answer is no, but there's a bit of a caveat to that. And so he isn't here anyway, so another reason not to worry about it, since it gets a bit ahead of ourselves. Oh, okay, now I know what you're talking about, Rubito. It's sad they ditched the design with the fog walls that had the messengers reaching out of it. Yeah, that really would have been really cool. Maybe a little bit hard to explain with the lore, but I mean, I guess the fog walls are already hard enough to explain, so just kind of a leftover of the whole like Demon Souls, Dark Souls thing that they've gotten going on in their games. I think even Sekiro has that feature as well, doesn't it? Twitch is being weird. So now I just need the Blood Rock. We're at like the 9th level, and we can only get 2 Blood Rocks normally, or just the 1 without the DLC, but...
Welcome home, good. What is it? Very well, let me...
Oh, I did forget to talk to the doll after dealing with Rom. So now we're going to start leveling up the arcane stat. Since why not at this point? Like, we don't have a whole lot else to spend it on. So after defeating Ram, the doll's dialogue will change, and I'll look at that in a second. Me himself is watching silently. Twitch is being weird. Ruby says fog walls have been a bit of an enigma ever since Demons, which is kind of sad. Yeah. It's probably... Oh well.
Welcome home. What is it?
Don't know what else to say about that.
Good hunter. Your presence somehow soothes. I sense the ancient echoes. They course your veins.
So that part about echoes, or the ancient echoes, is goes into the idea of like the willpower that I've mentioned before. Interestingly, in the Japanese dialogue, it doesn't specify it as like the dying wills. It just says like the wills is in like willpower or ambition. They are pronounced exactly the same in Japanese though, so it could have just been a conversion error on the kanji that they used, because there are a little bit of inconsistencies with that. But just in general, since defeating Ram, like, it should be thought that as a hunter, a being that inherits the wills of the dead as they go on, or like they have like the dead vicariously live through them by carrying on their wishes and dreams and desires to live. It's just like something about Ram to the doll is familiar, and that's something that I do wish we had more to work with. We just don't really get anything beyond what she says, and I really don't even have very many good guesses as to why. Just like maybe if, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there, just because I don't think I can say anything very good about it. Ruby says maybe it's significant because you don't have to level up at all to get that far into the game, so it's your own will. I don't necessarily know. It's because she calls it the ancient will, and so if we already had an ancient will, we should have had it from the beginning of the game. And so yeah. Speaking of a blood level 4 as a bumpkin. Well, no, I think there is like even if you like don't really use the wills, like they just kind of fortify the strength that you already have. So you might not necessarily need extra wills to do everything. Just like the will to persevere is like the quintessential like power level of like the Soulsborne genre. So yeah. I will not go into the Upper Cathedral Ward quite yet. I think for now I want to go through the lecture hall and maybe the very beginning of the Nightmare of Mensis, and then probably start like the Upper Cathedral Ward next time, because that's a very I don't know, like this next part will be pretty compact, and Upper Cathedral Ward does have a lot that ties together, and I think it's pretty good to go and keep all of that stuff together. So we come to the lecture building, and we are now on a different floor from the corpse of Mikolash, the mummy. And I suppose it isn't explicit that is the corpse of Mikolash, but that's like, who else would it be? Like, we don't really see anybody else wearing the uniform like that. And the connection between the Nightmare of Mensis and the Mensis rituals and using that corpse, I think it's just all supposed to tie together. I'm probably just more or less repeating myself at this point, so I'm going to continue forward. We get some more sedatives, connecting the idea that like this is Bergenworth, and they're coming into contact with the supernatural. Oh, okay, that was like a different enemy. I was like, what on earth? How did that happen? I was so confused by that iron that came out of the wall. I was like, wow, this guy broke. So there's not too much different on like the upper levels. We will see like a giant church servant with flaming hands. That is also a mystery. The ones up here will like be able to shoot projectiles at us, or not like shoot them, but like puke them at us, maybe? annoying than it needed to be. So we can go through. It's not this side. Like the first hallway we can go through to kind of access like this door. This like classroom from the upper levels for the first time. I'm just getting rid of the scholars. So I'm coming kind of in from the back route, like if you come in this way, there's not a whole lot that goes on. You just got a guy that falls from the ceiling. Oh, I know I've been taking so much damage. I've had the night set on. Like, not that my vitality is super high anyway to begin with. I just thought things have been hitting like a truck and couldn't figure out why. Oh, I totally misread what Soda said. He didn't say that blood level 4 is bumpkin. He said bumping. It's really fun. I've never done a blood level 4 run. I don't know. I just don't really like having to rely on the beast blood pellets. And I don't really have the patience to do it without the beast blood pellets, so whatever. I'm just a crotchety old man, I suppose. So this note is probably working off of older version of the Japanese text. I did look at the Korean for it, which it does match up with the English, and neither of those match with the Japanese in the final version of the game. So they have some pretty very different takes going on with the notes in the lecture hall. This is probably the second worst area, or maybe the worst in terms of like the consistency with the Japanese notes in the game. It says Master Willem was right. The evolution without courage will be the ruin of our race. The Japanese for that is like Professor Willem is right. The wretched evolution will be the downfall of man. So that is extremely different in terms of what like the message that's trying to get across. In that Willem just thinks we need more courage and we don't need fear to evolve. That might have been something like along with like Fear the Old Blood that they had going on earlier in the story. But like I think the transitioning point was like Willem didn't want to evolve, or like he may have been calling like the beast transformation itself to be wretched rather than like I don't know, whatever's going on with these scholars or something else. So that's a pretty big difference. So it's just like I'm not sure why they came and changed things here, but that's just the conclusion that I can reach based off the evidence that I've gotten so far. And this note is very, 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 very unfortunately mistranslated, or probably working. Well, it is 100% like working off like the older text as well. And looking at chat before that, we get the hunter set with the cape is great. It's probably the best set in the game in terms of defense, which is weird because you get it so early. Yeah, I do. That is a bit weird. Like beyond like the foreign set and like the very like weak sets, like the doll set and the sweaty set, like more like the joke sets. Like, armor in this game isn't too important compared to like Dark Souls, especially. There does seem to be like a pretty big difference though in terms of like how some of it scales up to a certain point, and it just seems like the higher resistance you get, like the less it matters after like you get beyond like 80 or 90 points of defense into a certain stat. Souls at Zero says, the note always seemed weird to me. Yeah, Willem's approach seemed to be the opposite of courageous. Yeah, so it does, like, it's not too bad, like, in terms of, like, understanding the lore. Like, I don't think it really changes perspectives too much, but this note right here that we're about to look at is kind of like the smoking gun that just did not work out in English, in my opinion. The nameless moon presence, beckoned by Lawrence and his associates, pale blood. So I feel like the way that this note is written sounds like it contradicts itself, because if pale blood is the name of, or like a name for the moon presence, why do they call it nameless? I think that may have been why they changed the Japanese for it as well. And like the Japanese version of this note is more literally close to Lawrence and his associates' moon presence, pale blood, with pale blood being put into quotes to show that it's something like they were addressing. Like pale blood should explicitly be understood to be like what they call the moon presence. And as far as like moon presence as a localization, I think that's a fantastic job. The term is like mamono, which is really hard to understand. It's like magic um, thing or creature, and so like rather than just calling it like the Lawrence's magic creature pale blood, like I think moon presence is a very good um, job for that, like presence instead of creature, because the moon part's consistent. It's like the moon magic creature, or the magical creature of the moon, or the magical being of the moon. So I think like the moon presence really keeps it kind of like enigmatic. Like it's not very clear that this is going to be a monster that we fight, or like a great one. It could just be some kind of like special force that we have no idea of right now. It's related to pale blood. So the fact that this does conserve the mystery that like the moon presence is a boss and there is like an extra boss after Gehrman, I think is very well done and very well handled on the part of the localizers. And there is an issue I think even in this translation, and I do think there is a mistranslation with it. The Japanese, or like the Korean for it, doesn't mention like that the moon presence was beckoned, so it should have just been like the nameless moon presence, or like Lawrence and his associates nameless moon presence pale blood, rather than beckoned by. So the idea of the moon presence being beckoned is not present in my opinion in like any version of the Japanese texts. So that's where I would say there might have been a small mistranslation or something injected on the behalf of the localizers. And so because of this, the way that it's written, I think that's why Pale Blood has been such an issue for fans to understand over the years, and it's one of the reasons why I've like decided to do this lore run. I really wanted to clarify like a lot of the more esoteric aspects of the text. Soda says evolution without courage is a poetic way of saying ascending. Sort of. It's just, yeah, I don't know. And then we get this note back here that just says 3/3 chords, and I find it fascinating that they phrased it this way rather than like 3/3 of chords or something like that, to keep it in line with like the way the American version of the game has it localized. I believe like the European version just has a third of or third umbilical cord as opposed to third of umbilical cord. So this they get the idea right with this one. Exactly the same thing, and it doesn't make sense on its own. 3/3 chords. And I do like that this note is surrounded by like a bunch of the like little fetal experiments that we've got going on. I think that's supposed to be a pretty good like foreshadowing of like just kind of how messed up that the entire like idea of using the umbilical cords is, and how it gets tied to the moon presence and evolution in general. I think this area does set up like a lot of that kind of knowledge within the game, and it just doesn't really get transferred to the English very well, in my opinion. This door right here leads us to the Nightmare of Mensis, and then that's the giant church servant with the flaming hands, which I mentioned earlier before. No idea why its hands are on fire. You'd think it'd be like waving them around or something, but it's just kind of chilling, protecting a trap door, where we can go and eat patches in a second. Hit that dude so hard his hat fell off. And then his friend bitch smacked me to compensate. Thumeru, pyromancy, the things you expect, yeah. It's a little bit of a shame we didn't get like more of that kind of theme in general. So these guys will like throw these urns filled with this silvery liquid at us, and probably shouldn't do this right now, but the way that they refill it is like they puke into it. So this harmful liquid that's like silver, mercury type stuff comes from the bodies of these slime scholars, which lends into the whole idea that like maybe their bodies are part mercury or quicksilver as well, since they tend to drop a lot of it, which they didn't right now, of course. So we get some more chunks. And then there's the entrance to like the upper part of the classroom that we can access before. The silvery liquid looks kind of like melted quicksilver, and quicksilver is your blood, so maybe it's a variant of that concept. Quicksilver isn't necessarily your blood, but there certainly is a lot of overlap between those ideas. Quicksilver is an old-timey name for mercury, like the liquid metal. And so when we come in here, we gain the communion rune, and that's all like tied to like the choir as well. We gained one from the corpse in the back of the clinic, and we will gain another level of the communion rune from the celestial emissary boss fight. So the idea of like kin being connected to communion is applied here as well. Like the slime scholars are of a cosmic kin enemy type, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty confident that's true. I might be wrong. Tries to step on us. Backhands the crap out of us. Breaks some of these little desks as he goes about. And we just get some measly twins from it. More importantly, we gain access to a certain rocking chair and a desk, and a certain asshole who likes to kick us off cliffs. We gain insight from seeing its true form. We can talk to him.
Oh, this cannot be.
Scare the crap out of him.
You cannot be. No, you didn't. Lord Amygdala? Oh, how did this come to pass?
So he gives us the beg for life emote, which is really funny to me, or the gesture.
Now, wait just a moment. Do you think ill of me? Me?
So we could always say that we hate Patches for what he did, but we could also become his so-called friend by just saying, oh no, we don't really hate him for what he did.
Indeed, I should think not. I shared with you a thing most secret. Now you're witness to a miracle, and all the stronger for it. You should appreciate it, if you've a grain of gratitude in you. Yes. Appreciate it.
And then we get some, very, very friendly and very, very sane laughter to accompany his text. I would like to point out, I think English dialogue is a little bit all over the place, but that's just kind of how they characterized him in this game. So rather than just saying, no, you didn't, Lord Amygdala, which is perfectly fine, he says, could it be Amygdala by you? And so, he doesn't really add, a suffix to be, Sama, to, say that it's more like Lord Amygdala. So the English does present that relationship as being more subservient and not necessarily what's in the Japanese, which is fine, I suppose. And then the whole part about I shared with you a thing most secret, now you're witness to a miracle and all the stronger for it. That's a little bit I don't know, indirect, or kind of goes around the points. The Japanese is closer to if we say that we hate him very much, that it was a terrible misunderstanding, it was unfair. And this part is shared between them. I told you, let me rephrase that. I certainly told you a secret, and you gained power to face the arcane, isn't that right? So the whole idea is like what Patches did to us. Like he told us about like the cathedral, and he made us face Amygdala, and that gave us enough strength to face like the kind of supernatural forces that are going on in Bloodborne. And so after that, he says like we should be thankful to him, and he calls us a child of man, which separates himself from us, I suppose. If for the normal English dialogue, if we tell him that we think ill of him, he says, "Oh, it pains me to hear it. You've made yourself a misreckoning. I shared with you a thing most secret. Now you're a witness to a miracle and all the stronger for it. It's plain as a pikestaff. Now, say in my heart, you were as a lamb to my God. Well, you weren't to know, and it wasn't for you to know. All's well that ends well, I say." Like that, it just does not seem to flow together very coherently. And just to kind of reread a little bit of what I said with the Japanese, oh, it was a terrible misunderstanding. It's unfair. He told us about the secret, and we gain the power to face the arcane. Isn't that right? For example, even if I wanted you to offer you as a human sacrifice, it was only in my head. If no one knew about it, I say it's something which shouldn't count. And then he just like starts laughing and laughing. And so like one of the themes about like Patches is like um, there is no real like bad actions. Like nobody's there to like find out about it. It's pretty funny. And so like if we don't hate him for what he did, if like we forgive him, all is well that ends well. Catchphrase between the Soulsborne series and Japanese, he just says it's like a no count. So like it's like a gaming term, and like it's a point that doesn't count. So like what he did shouldn't be like held against him essentially. And going back to chat, Soda says, it looks like the beast possessed souls pyromancy. Oh shit, it's room from the Fear the Old Blood memory. Yeah, well, the desk for like Willem is shared between this room and in Bergenworth. I think Lance did say that the cutscene does take place in the lecture hall. I don't remember for sure though. It's on one of his cut content videos. So Souls at Zero says you love his laugh when he tells us that we should be grateful. Ruby says fandom says that they're kin. Trying to find the answer on Maps Wiki right now. I'm very confident like the switching of the blood gems will reveal that they're kin. I just can't remember 100%. Yeah, Maps does say that they're kin as well. Cosmic kin is what I would say. I think they may have like been trying to imbibe like Quicksilver or conducting experiments with like the phantasms to become more slug-like, and that might be why they're kin of the cosmos and they don't really have like bones like normal people will. Face cam, yeah, essentially. So as we can see, Patches is in a pretty interesting position here. He is a human head attached to a spiderling body, and he's got this kind of interesting necklace that's going around. One of the cut lines for the old lady does say that like Patches was her child or is her child, and they cut that from the game. I don't really know why. I don't necessarily think it takes a lot from the story, or I don't know. You can take that to be however you want it. Confirmation that he is, or confirmation that he's not, since they did take it out of the game.
No matter. Such details are trifling. We're fast friends by now. Let this express what words cannot.
I do like that line, like we're fast friends by now. I don't know, it just has a really pleasant ring to it to me. And then he gives us another counterclockwise metamorphosis rune, which does like boost our stamina bar, which I really like these kind of runes.
Oh, doubt me not, sweet compeer. What is friendship but a chance encounter?
So this is really interesting, and because like the idea of like the chance encounter is what's brought up in relation to what's mentioned with the umbilical cords with what do you want to call it? Like meeting the moon presence is described as a chance encounter. The audience with Murgo is also described as a chance encounter. So I wonder if Patches is making a kind of reference to that. I'm not too sure, but I think that is something that he's trying to allude to. Like Patches always seems to know a little more than like what he lets on.
Ah, well met. My apologies, but I I feel a profound thought occurring. On the good grace of a certain god, and the way he meted out his love.
And so that sinister laughter, which follows that, is a bit unsettling. I wonder if what he talks about with the grace of a certain god meeting out its love is related to Erden. I think that's a possibility, but I also think it may be more likely that he's talking about offering sacrifices to Amygdala and seeing Amygdala just, kill them and consume them. And
my apologies.
He doesn't really have anything else to say. So before I forget, I would like to go to the Cathedral Ward to show off the state that Ariana is now in. And I'll do that once we access the Nightmare of Mensis and get that first lantern unlocked. And I think that will probably conclude today's stream, unless I remember something else before we do that. Voice acting in Souls is always so ASMR. Is there any connection between Patches and Rom? Well, Rom is called a vacuous spider, and Patches is a kind of spider. I mean, beyond that, there's really nothing else I can think to say. Maybe potential scholarly link, although there's unfortunately nothing linking Rom to actually having been a scholar. So now that we've been granted access to the Nightmare of Mensis, we can see there is no physical linking to the lecture theater. Very similar to how we were granted access to the Nightmare Frontier. Once we are in the Nightmare of Mensis, there's a lot of different kind of changes in the landscape. We've got the skeletal screaming type figures composing the rock-like structures of what's going on in here. And one of my greatest tinfoil theories about nightmares and the Nightmare of Mensis in general is that they're all tied to this kind of nightmarish mist that we literally see coming out of the ground here. And if we hit certain enemies like the Wandering Madnesses, or if we compare it perhaps to the type of mist which comes out of the Yharnamites that the Thumerian women are resurrecting in Yahar'gul, I think the whole idea that we can tie nightmares into the blood and insight and bells and dead people, it really all does kind of come back together in an unexpectedly cohesive way when you really examine everything close together. And so I really like this shot, and it's a little bit hard to miss, coming into the Nightmare of Mensis. We've got this towering church chapel thing that's going on in the background. And it might be a little bit related to how when you go through the Cathedral Ward and its steps, you've got the astral clock tower facing the player as well. And then we get some more Lauren Silver Beasts in this area, and if you kill them, the hateful maggots will pop out of them, and they have a parasitic relationship. I don't believe the maggots will pop out if you kill them with a visceral attack or with a fire-based attack. Right, so there's no maggots, and so that's pretty confirmed. And then there will be some more Wandering Madnesses when we're running up. Some more Bloodstone chunks, even though I can't use it on the cane. I can start to upgrade a different weapon for sure. Some Frenzied Cold Blood, and one interesting aspect about that is this dude is covered in these dark reddish spears, and we begin to hear a kind of whispering sound, and a very ominous glowing appears in the background. When we take cover, that glowing goes away, the whispering stops, and this is a feature of the Nightmare of Mensis that we can disable later. It's related to the so-called Brain of Mensis, a great one that's been chained up and will inflict frenzy on anything that it directs its gaze at. And I will have more to talk about with that next time. And just to kind of show that off, coming out here, you get these frenzy spears coming out of her body, and the frenzy meter begins to fill up. The more insight we have, the more these frenzy spears will affect us and cause us to go frenzy faster. So it's important to have a somewhat controlled amount of insight when going into this area and dealing with enemies like Winter Lanterns. You have fond memories of the frenzy feature? Don't we all? It's also really funny to just kind of see players on their first playthrough of Bloodborne encountering what's going on in the Nightmare of Mensis, because it's unlike what they'd experienced so far, and it's very common for people to just kind of freak out immediately when that happens. So coming back to Cathedral Ward, Ariana's in a little bit of a worse state. If we examine her side a little bit more closely, we can see that it's started to become a little bit bloated. It's a little bit hard to tell, I admit. Her hair isn't as vibrant, and she is a little bit more pale, but again, it's a little bit hard to see. You might have to take my word for it. If you look at like the sliders in Meph's wiki, you will see that there are 3 different sets for Ariana. And she will continue to moan. She no longer has like kind of meaningful dialogue for this area. There is a special feature to using like 5 of her blood vials, and I didn't do it this round because if Della would have killed her. And that she will have some special dialogue at the very end of her quest. So, I think that can conclude things for today's episode. Thank everybody for who showed up and who's continued to support the stream as it's progressed. If you're watching these on YouTube, I also support your guys' continued support from there. Thank you there. I do have my Discord link to my Twitch channel about information, and it should also be in the video description if you're watching this later on. So once again, thank everybody for showing up, and have a good day.